Have you ever played in a D&D campaign that felt less like a game and more like you were living in a really good fantasy novel? One with twists and turns that just totally gripped you and you were dying to know what would happen next.
Oh yeah, for sure. Those are the campaigns that stay with you, don't they?
Absolutely, and I think the secret sauce for a lot of those campaigns is something called a quest chain. And that is exactly what we are deep diving into today.
Ooh, fun.
We're taking a close look at the LitRPG Reads article, The Secret to Crafting Engaging D&D Quest Chains for Memorable Campaigns. It's by Isaac Hanson. It was published just this week on January 23, 2025.
Excellent choice. I think quest chains are really at the core of so many great stories, and this article has a lot of great advice.
You know, I was just thinking about this recently. I was playing in a tabletop RPG, and my character stumbled on what seemed like a really simple side quest.
Okay.
It involved helping this gnome get back a stolen trinket from some goblins.
Classic.
Right. Super typical. But it turned out that this trinket was actually a piece of this powerful artifact. Yeah, and getting it back set off this whole chain of events that led us to this conspiracy with a corrupt noble and a secret society. It totally changed how the campaign went.
That's amazing. That's exactly why I think quest chains are so cool. They can turn a bunch of little adventures into one big, meaningful story.
So let's break this down. What exactly is a quest chain?
Well, basically, it's a series of quests that are all connected to form a larger narrative. So, like, think of a TV show with multiple episodes that all build up to a big finale.
Okay.
Each quest is like a building block, and when you put them all together, they create this cohesive and satisfying experience for your players.
Gotcha. So can you give us an example of how you would take like a typical quest and make it part of a bigger quest chain?
Totally. So let's say you've got a classic fetch quest
Yeah.
where the players need to find this rare magical herb in like a dangerous forest, right? Pretty standard.
Yeah, we've all been there, done that.
Exactly. So that's your standalone quest. But to turn it into a quest chain, you could reveal that this herb is the only thing that can cure this mysterious plague that's spreading across the land.
Okay, so now it's more than just fetching a herb. The stakes are higher.
Exactly. And then as the players investigate the plague, they find out that it was created by this shadowy organization, and now that simple fetch quest is suddenly part of this huge web of intrigue and danger.
I can see how that would hook the players and make them want to keep going.
Exactly. And each new quest in the chain could reveal more clues about the plague, who's behind it, and what their ultimate goal is.
So it's about building momentum, keeping the players engaged, and making them feel like they're part of something bigger.
Exactly. And that's where the structure of a quest chain comes in.
Okay.
It's kind of like a good story. It needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, a classic narrative structure.
Makes sense.
So the beginning is all about hooking the players, giving them a reason to care about what's happening, and invest in the outcome. You need a strong, inciting incident, something that throws things off balance and sets the players off on their adventure.
Like that plague we talked about earlier.
Exactly right. Or it could be like a call to action from someone important, a threat to their home, or even a personal quest for revenge.
Right, and then the middle is where things start to escalate.
Exactly. Secrets are revealed, the danger increases, and the players face bigger and tougher challenges. That's where you bring in new allies and enemies, explore new locations, and really develop the main conflicts of your story.
You're keeping the tension high and making sure the players are invested.
Right, and finally you have the end of the quest chain, which is the climax. All the players' actions have led up to this moment.
The big showdown.
Exactly. And to make it truly satisfying, it should feel like a natural conclusion to everything that's come before it. The players should feel like everything they've done has brought them to this point.
So it's not just about beating the bad guy. It's about seeing how the choices they made along the way affected the outcome.
Exactly. A well-designed quest chain should make the players feel like they've truly accomplished something and that their actions have had a real impact on the world.
So let's dig into the nitty-gritty of building a really great quest chain. What are some key things that DMs should keep in mind when they're designing their campaigns?
One crucial thing is to start small, but always have that connection to the bigger picture. Even those early quests in the chain should hint at the larger narrative that's unfolding.
Okay.
So what seems like a small problem in a local village could actually be a symptom of a much larger threat that's looming on the horizon.
So you're dropping little hints and clues, leading the players down a path of discovery.
Exactly. You're foreshadowing what's to come. Sprinkle those clues in early on. It could be a prophecy or some recurring symbols or even just a strange feeling that something isn't right.
Foreshadowing is such a great way to build suspense and keep players guessing.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the gameplay itself, you got to keep things balanced. You want a good mix of combat exploration and role-playing throughout the quest chain.
Right. Too much of one thing can get boring.
Exactly, and mix up the encounters too. Don't just throw the same types of monsters at them over and over again. Get creative and keep them on their toes.
Throw in some environmental puzzles, social encounters, maybe a chase scene or two.
Yes! You got it, the possibilities are endless. Now, when it comes to the stakes, don't just rely on those generic threats like saving the world. Give players personal reasons to care about what happens. Put those NPCs they love in danger, or create consequences for failing smaller tasks.
Make it personal for their characters.
Exactly. And remember, those character backstories, don't let them just sit there unused. Tie elements of the quest chain to their pasts and goals.
Oh, that's good. So the players feel a deeper connection to the story.
Exactly. And think about introducing conflict between different factions, too.
Okay.
That adds layers to the story and gives the players choices about who they support and who they oppose.
Like two kingdoms fighting over an artifact, or a conflict between a merchant's guild and a thieves' guild.
Exactly. Those are great examples. And one of my favorite things to do is to connect those seemingly unrelated quests. So maybe the friendly NPC they helped out earlier turns out to be a key player in the main story. Or that seemingly unimportant item they found actually unlocks a powerful artifact later on.
I love those moments when everything clicks into place.
Me too. It's so satisfying, and always show that the player's actions actually matter. Their decisions should have real consequences and change the world around them in a noticeable way.
So don't be afraid to let their choices have a ripple effect.
Right, and when you're wrapping up a quest, don't tie up every loose end. Leave some breadcrumbs that hint at future adventures or unsolved mysteries.
Like a cliffhanger that leaves them wanting more.
Exactly. A well-crafted quest chain will keep your players engaged and invested long after the current quest is over.
This is all great stuff. I'm already thinking about how to apply these ideas to my own campaigns.
Awesome. Remember, you're creating an experience, not just telling a story. Embrace those unexpected things your players do and use them to shape the narrative in ways you never even imagined.
Be flexible, go with the flow.
Exactly. Now let's talk about something that a lot of DMs struggle with: linear versus nonlinear quest chains.
Yes, the eternal debate.
Right, a linear quest chain is like a straight path, a very focused and streamlined experience. You know exactly where you're going and what you'll see along the way.
Okay, so it's very structured and keeps the story moving at a steady pace.
Exactly. But the downside is that it can feel a little railroaded, like the player's choices don't really matter because they're on this predetermined track.
It can make the world feel less dynamic and like the players have less agency.
Right. On the other hand, a nonlinear quest chain gives players way more freedom to do things in any order they choose.
So it's more like an open world where they can explore and experiment.
Exactly. And that makes the world feel much more dynamic and like their choices have a real impact.
But I guess the risk there is that the story could lose focus if the players wander too far off track.
That's true. It can be tricky to maintain a cohesive narrative when the players are pulling in different directions.
So it's finding that balance between giving them freedom and making sure the story stays engaging.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of DMs go for a hybrid approach, combining the structure of a linear chain with some of the flexibility of a nonlinear one.
Getting the best of both worlds.
Exactly. So for example, the main objective might be to collect 3 ancient artifacts, but the order in which they collect them is completely up to them.
Oh, I like that. So there's an overarching goal, but the players have some control over how they get there.
Precisely. It's a great way to keep the story engaging while still giving the players agency.
This is all super helpful. I'm already seeing how I can use this to improve my own campaigns.
Now
I know we can't talk about quest chains without talking about pacing.
Yes, pacing is so important. Even the best story and characters can fall flat if the pacing is off.
It's like a movie that drags on forever or rushes through the important parts without giving them enough time.
Exactly. Different parts of your quest chain should have their own unique pace. The beginning should focus on building intrigue and setting the scene, while the middle should amp up the tension and keep the players on the edge of their seats.
It's about creating a natural flow, knowing when to speed things up and when to slow down.
Exactly. And remember, don't rush through those critical moments just to keep things moving. Give those big battles, puzzles, and character interactions the time and space they deserve.
Let them breathe.
Exactly. Now, for some specific pacing tips, think about using cliffhangers to end your sessions.
Keep them coming back for more.
Right, and don't be afraid to throw in some mini-boss battles throughout the quest chain. They're like little spikes of tension without fully resolving the main conflict.
They test the player's strength and give them a preview of what's to come.
Exactly. And it's also important to plan for some downtime. Not every session needs to be full of action and excitement. Give your players some time to relax, explore the world, and develop their characters.
Those moments of quiet and character interaction are essential for immersion.
Absolutely. Another great technique is to seed mysteries throughout the quest chain. Keep your players guessing and theorizing. Drop hints and clues that point to a larger conspiracy or some hidden truth.
Mystery and intrigue keep people hooked.
For sure. And mix up your quest styles too. Don't just make every quest a dungeon crawl. You can do puzzles, social encounters, time challenges, chases, you name it.
Keep them on their toes.
Exactly. And when they have to travel somewhere, break up those long journeys with random encounters. It just adds a little spice to those otherwise boring travel times.
Random encounters are always fun.
Totally. Now, when it comes to the stakes, remember that not every quest has to be about saving the world. Sometimes the most compelling quests are about protecting a single person, recovering a lost heirloom, or even just proving a point.
So make those smaller scale conflicts feel just as important as the big ones.
Exactly. And when your players succeed, let them celebrate. Don't rush them from one quest to the next. Give them a chance to enjoy their victories and revel in their accomplishments.
They earned it.
Right. And when it comes to cliffhangers, don't make them too predictable. Not every cliffhanger needs to be a combat encounter or a big reveal. Sometimes the most effective ones are those that leave the players with a difficult choice to make or a question that they can't stop thinking about.
Ooh, yeah. A moral dilemma or some unsettling new information that makes them question everything.
Exactly. It keeps them on the edge of their seats. And remember, pacing is all about adapting to your players. Pay attention to their reactions and adjust the pace accordingly.
Speed things up if they seem bored, slow things down if they're overwhelmed. It's about finding that sweet spot.
You got it. By focusing on pacing, you can make sure your players stay invested from the very first session to the epic finale.
This is all fantastic advice. I'm already seeing so many ways to improve my own campaigns.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Are you ready to move on to some even more advanced techniques for taking your quest chains to the next level?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So are you ready to dive even deeper into the art of quest chain design?
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
Okay, well, one area that often gets overlooked is the power of side quests.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of them as just filler content, something to keep the players busy between the main story beats.
Right.
But I think side quests can actually add a ton of depth and richness to your campaign if you do them right.
Okay. I'm interested. How do we turn those side quests from just distractions into something that really enhances the overall experience?
The key is integration. You gotta tie them into the main narrative, even if it's subtle. So, a side quest could reveal information about the villain's plans or introduce an ally who will become crucial later on.
Right, so they're not just random encounters, they're actually contributing to the bigger picture.
Exactly, and don't forget to reward your players for completing those side quests too. It doesn't always have to be gold or magic items.
Yeah, what else could you reward them with?
It could be information reputation, access to a new location, or even a favor from a powerful NPC.
Oh, good. I like that. Now, speaking of making players feel like their actions matter, let's talk about player agency.
Yes, player agency is so important for creating a truly engaging campaign.
It's all about giving players choices that actually affect the world around them.
Exactly. The best quest chains make players feel like their decisions have real weight and that their choices have consequences that ripple through the world.
So it's not just about following a set path, they're actually shaping the narrative as they play.
Right, and branching paths are a good way to do that, but it's more than just giving them an A or B choice.
Okay.
It's about creating situations where there are multiple ways forward, each with its own set of consequences.
And sometimes the best choices are the ones where there's no easy answer, right?
Absolutely. Those are the ones that lead to the best role-playing moments and can have a real impact on how the story unfolds.
Okay, so we've talked about the structure of quest chains and the importance of player agency. Now, let's talk about the characters who populate those quests.
Yes, NPCs are so much more than just quest givers or villains.
Right.
They're the heart and soul of your world. They bring the story to life, and they make the experience so much richer for your players.
I love creating memorable NPCs, but how can we make sure they actually enhance the quest chains?
Don't just stick to the typical archetypes, the wise old wizard, the grizzled warrior, the sneaky rogue.
Okay.
Think outside the box. Create characters who are quirky and unpredictable. Give them unique personalities and motivations.
Make them feel real, even if they're not human.
Exactly. And remember that your NPCs can evolve throughout the campaign too. Their loyalties might shift, their goals might change, and they might even surprise the players in unexpected ways.
So we need to be flexible and adapt our NPCs as the story develops.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, but Are you ready to delve into some even more advanced techniques?
Oh yeah, let's get into the really juicy stuff.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so let's talk about world building and how it plays into creating amazing quest chains.
Oh yeah, world building, that's my jam. I love creating these detailed worlds for my players to explore.
Me too, it's so much fun, but how do we make sure that all that world building actually enhances the quests instead of overwhelming them?
Right, that's a good question.
I think the key is integration. You want to weave those world-building details into the quests themselves, so the players are uncovering the history, the culture, the secrets of your world through their actions.
Okay, so don't just dump a bunch of lore on them all at once. Let them discover it organically as they play.
Exactly. Each quest should be like a little window into a specific aspect of the world, whether it's the history of a region, the beliefs of a certain faction, or the consequences of some long-forgotten war.
So the quests are like little pieces of a larger puzzle that the players are putting together.
That's a great way to put it. It makes the world feel more real and lived in.
Right, like it has depth and history beyond just what the players are immediately experiencing.
Exactly. So for example, let's say the players are on a quest to find a legendary sword that's hidden in the ruins of an ancient city.
Classic.
Right, totally classic. But instead of just making it a dungeon crawl, you could weave in the history of that city.
Okay.
Like maybe the players uncover clues about a war that happened centuries ago, or the rise and fall of an empire, or even the tragic fate of the sword's previous owner.
Ooh, that's good.
Huh.
So now it's not just about finding a sword, it's about exploring the past, uncovering secrets, and understanding how those events have shaped the world they're in now.
Exactly. And when you're designing quests for specific environments, think about the unique challenges of opportunities those environments present.
Okay.
Like a quest that works great in a bustling city might not make sense in a desolate wasteland.
Different environments, different approaches.
Exactly. So in an urban setting, your quest might focus on intrigue, political maneuvering, social encounters, things like that.
Infiltrating a noble's mansion, or navigating the complex hierarchy of a thieves' guild.
Exactly. While in a wilderness setting, you might focus more on survival exploration encounters with dangerous creatures.
Tracking a mythical beast through a dense forest, or surviving a perilous journey across a treacherous mountain range.
Exactly. Those are great examples.
Okay, so we've talked about environments now. What about factions?
Oh yeah, factions are essential for adding structure, conflict, and intrigue to your campaign.
They're the groups and organizations that drive the events of the story and shape the world around them.
Precisely. And the best way to incorporate them into your quest chains is to make their goals and motivations directly relevant to the player's actions.
Okay.
Each faction should have its own agenda, its own history, and its own role to play in the larger narrative.
So it's not just about random encounters with nameless bandits or goblins.
Right. Those encounters are driven by the faction's goals and their relationships with each other.
And the player's choices can influence how those factions interact with each other and with the world.
Exactly. It creates this dynamic web of relationships that feels real and engaging.
And those relationships can evolve over time.
Absolutely. Alliances can shift, betrayals can occur, new factions can emerge. It's all about keeping things unpredictable and exciting.
Okay, so now that we've laid the groundwork, let's talk about the big bad, the villain.
Yes. Every great story needs a compelling antagonist, and a well-designed quest chain is no different.
They're the ones who drive the conflict, challenge the players, and push them to their limits.
Exactly. But what makes a villain truly memorable? It's more than just being evil. You got to give them depth motivation, a believable goal.
Make them feel like real people, not just cardboard cutouts.
Exactly. And the first step is to define their motivations and their arc.
So why are they doing what they're doing? What are their goals? What events in their past shaped who they are today?
Precisely, what do they believe in? What are they trying to achieve? And most importantly, how do they plan to get there?
We're getting into their backstory, their psychology, their worldview.
Right, and remember, a villain's goal doesn't always have to be about world domination or ultimate power. Sometimes the most interesting villains are driven by a twisted sense of justice, a desire to protect something they love, or even a belief that they're doing the right thing.
Their goals might even align with the player's goals, in some ways, creating some really interesting moral dilemmas.
Exactly. Those are the best kinds of conflicts. Now, to really make a villain stick in the players' minds, you got to make them feel personal.
Okay, how do we do that?
Connect them to the players' backstories or their personal goals. Maybe the villain was once a mentor to one of the PCs, or their actions directly affected a player's hometown.
So the conflict becomes personal, it has real emotional weight for the players.
Exactly. And even though the villain's methods might be terrible, Try to make their goals understandable.
So the players can see their point of view, even if they don't agree with it.
Exactly. A villain who genuinely believes they're doing the right thing, even if it means doing evil things, is far more compelling than a one-dimensional bad guy.
And don't forget to humanize your villains, too.
Yes. Even the most powerful and terrifying villains should have moments of vulnerability, compassion, even humor. It makes them feel more real and relatable.
It makes them more believable.
Exactly, and don't just let them sit around in their lair waiting for the players to show up.
Yeah.
Make them active participants in the story. Let them scheme, manipulate, disrupt the players' plans.
Let them win sometimes, even if it's just a small victory.
Exactly. It raises the stakes and makes the final confrontation all the more satisfying.
Okay, so we've created this amazing villain. How do we introduce them to the players?
Timing is key.
Yeah.
You don't want to bring them in too early or they lose their mystique, but you also don't want to wait too long or they might feel like they came out of nowhere.
So what's the sweet spot?
Start hinting at their presence early on without revealing their full identity or plans. You can do this through rumors, cryptic clues, encounters with their minions.
Build up the anticipation and the dread.
Exactly. And when you do finally introduce them, make it a moment to remember. Give them a grand entrance, showcase their power, and leave the players wanting more.
Now what about mini-bosses and lieutenants?
Ah, yes, the supporting cast of antagonists. They're crucial for keeping the players engaged and building towards that final confrontation with the big bad.
They're like stepping stones along the path.
Exactly, and they should feel like distilled versions of the main villain sharing similar goals, motivations, or methods.
So they're like a reflection of the villain's power and influence.
Precisely, and by defeating these mini-bosses, the players gain experience, loot, and information that will help them in the final battle.
It's like training for the big fight.
Exactly, and when you're designing your mini-bosses, think about their role in the story. Are they a loyal enforcer, a cunning strategist, a master of a particular type of magic, or even a tragic figure who's been manipulated by the villain?
Each one should have their own unique personality and present a specific challenge to the players.
Exactly, and give them interesting backstories and motivations too. Why are they working for the villain? What are their goals? And how do they feel about the players getting in their way?
The more depth you give them, the more engaging they'll be.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about long-term campaigns.
Okay.
These are the campaigns that span dozens of sessions, maybe even years. The epic sagas that really test your storytelling abilities.
And your sanity.
Right. But don't worry, there are ways to manage those long-term campaigns and keep your players engaged for the long haul.
I'm all ears. My current campaign is shaping up to be a pretty long one, and I want to make sure it stays exciting.
Well, one important thing is to break up those long quest chains into smaller, more manageable arcs.
Okay.
Think of them like chapters in a book. Each arc has its own beginning, middle, and end with its own set of goals and challenges. But they all contribute to the larger narrative of the campaign.
So it's like a series of mini campaigns within the larger campaign.
Exactly, and by breaking it down into smaller chunks, you make it easier for the players to digest and stay interested.
It also gives us, as DMs, more flexibility to adjust the pace, introduce new elements, or even change direction if we need to.
Right, you're not locked into one rigid plan. Another important thing to do is revisit those old quest chains.
Oh, you mean bring back elements from past adventures?
Exactly. It creates this sense of continuity and rewards players for their long-term investment in the game.
It shows that their choices had lasting consequences.
Precisely. Maybe a villain they thought they defeated comes back seeking revenge, or a town they saved faces a new threat, or a seemingly insignificant item they found suddenly becomes crucial to solving a current problem.
It's like planting seeds that bloom later on.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to let the consequences of their past actions come back to haunt them. It makes the world feel more real and the story more complex.
So we're talking about long-term campaigns and rewarding players for sticking with us for the long haul. What are some good ways to do that?
Well, the rewards need to feel significant and meaningful, of course.
Okay.
Tangible rewards like powerful magic items and lots of gold are always nice. But don't forget about the intangible rewards too. Things like titles recognition and the opportunity to shape the world around them.
So maybe they become the leader of a faction, or their actions inspire a new generation of heroes.
Exactly. Or maybe they just achieve a personal goal that's been driving them throughout the campaign. The key is to make those rewards feel personal and relevant to their characters.
Make them feel like their efforts have truly made a difference.
Exactly. Mastering the art of long-term campaign management takes time and practice. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
It requires patience, flexibility, and a willingness to adapt to your players' interests and goals.
But the payoff is worth it, right?
Absolutely. A well-run long-term campaign is an unforgettable experience for everyone involved.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of great stuff today, but I think it's important to acknowledge that things don't always go according to plan.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even the best laid plans can go awry.
It's the nature of D&D.
Yeah.
But the good news is that most of those common pitfalls can be avoided, or at least mitigated, with some careful planning.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of those pitfalls and how to steer clear of them.
Okay, let's start with narrative stagnation.
hmm
How can we tell if our story is getting stale, and what can we do to prevent it?
Well, narrative stagnation happens when the story feels stuck. The stakes haven't been raised in a while, the players feel like their actions aren't really making a difference, the quests have become repetitive and predictable.
It's like the story has lost its momentum.
Exactly. So how do we avoid that? Well, one thing you can do is shake things up a bit. Introduce a new faction or a rival who throws a wrench into the players' plans.
Like a rival adventuring party with their own agenda, or a powerful organization with a hidden motive?
Exactly, or change the environment. If they've been stuck in one place for too long, send them somewhere completely different with new challenges and opportunities.
A change of scenery can do wonders.
It can, and another thing you can do is raise the personal stakes. Tie the events of the quest chain to the players' backstories. Maybe the villain threatens someone they care about or targets their hometown.
Make it personal. Give them a reason to fight for something more than just the fate of the world.
Exactly, and don't be afraid to let the villain win sometimes.
Oh, that's a good one.
It shows the players that they're up against a real threat, and it makes their victories all the more satisfying.
And those mini-bosses we talked about earlier. They're great for breaking up the monotony and giving the players a sense of progress.
Absolutely, and when it comes to the quests themselves, mix up the styles. Don't just do dungeon crawls all the time. Do puzzles, social encounters, chases, investigations. Keep things interesting.
Keep them guessing.
Exactly. Now, another common pitfall is losing player focus.
Ah, yes, the dreaded sidetrack.
It happens to the best of us. Players are curious and easily distracted.
Shiny objects everywhere.
Right, so how do we keep them on track without railroading them? Well, one thing you can do is use NPCs to remind them of the stakes.
Like trusted ally expressing concern, or a wise old sage issuing a warning.
Exactly, or someone begs them for help, emphasizing how urgent the situation is.
Appeal to their sense of empathy and responsibility.
Exactly. Another technique is to tie those side quests into the main goal somehow.
So even if they're getting sidetracked, they're still making progress toward the main objective?
Right, maybe that random treasure they find turns out to be a key to defeating the villain or unlocking a new area.
Or that eccentric NPC they befriended has vital information or a special skill that they need.
Exactly, and don't forget about world consequences. If the players spend too much time messing around, let them see what happens. Maybe a town falls to the enemy or a key ally gets captured.
Give them a sense of urgency and responsibility.
Right, and you can also leverage those player backstories. Tie the events of the main quest to their personal goals and motivations.
Make those choices matter.
Exactly. Maybe the villain kidnaps a loved one or threatens to destroy their hometown.
Give them a personal reason to fight.
And keep dropping those clues. Remind them of the mysteries that need solving and the answers they're seeking.
Keep them hooked.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about another pitfall that can trip up even the most experienced DM's overcomplication.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
It's easy to get carried away with world building and intricate plots, but there's a fine line between complexity and confusion.
Too many threads and it all becomes a tangled mess.
Exactly. So how do we find that balance? Well, first, be mindful of how many storylines are running at the same time.
Oh, wow.
If the players are juggling too many objectives, it can get overwhelming. And be careful about introducing too many factions or organizations. If there are too many names and relationships to keep track of, it'll just get confusing.
And don't overload them with information all at once.
Right? Information overload is a real thing. So how do we simplify without sacrificing depth? We'll focus on the core conflict of the campaign. What's the main driving force of the story? What are the key challenges that the players need to overcome? Once you've figured that out, you can start trimming away the excess.
Cut anything that's not essential to the main plot or the player's goals.
Exactly, and prioritize clarity over complexity. Make sure your players understand the main objectives and how their actions are contributing to the story.
Check in with them regularly to make sure they're not lost.
And don't be afraid to revise your quest chain as you go. If something isn't working or if the players are getting bogged down in details, change it up.
Be flash.
Exactly. The goal is to create an experience that's both challenging and rewarding without sacrificing clarity or focus.
Well, I think this has been a fantastic deep dive. We've covered so much ground today, from the basics of structuring a quest chain to advanced techniques for world building, crafting villains and managing those long-term campaigns.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has. And we've talked about how to avoid those common pitfalls and keep our stories engaging and exciting.
Absolutely.
And of course, we have to give a shout out to LitRPG Reads and author Isaac Hanson for their insightful article, The Secret to Crafting Engaging D&D Quest Chains for Memorable Campaigns. It's a great resource for this discussion.
It was a really good article.
So for our listeners out there, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. What are some of the most memorable quest chains you've experienced in your own D&D games? What made those campaigns so special? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, definitely let us know.
And until next time, may your dice rolls be high and your adventures legendary.